Welcome to the channel. I'm actually so excited for this one, I don't want to bury the lead. I'm going to spoil something that I really build up to, but I just want to start off with it. There's a paper titled Intentional Fire Spreading by Firehawk Raptors in Northern Australia. And it says, quote, "We document indigenous ecological knowledge and non-indigenous observations of intentional fire spreading by the fire-foraging raptors black kite, whistling kite, and brown falcon in tropical Australian savannas. Observers report both solo and cooperative attempts, often successful, to spread wildfires intentionally via single occasion or repeated transport of burning sticks in talons or beaks." In other words, our ancestors have been watching birds be the masters of fire for tens of thousands of years. The way this channel works is I just learn something odd and I keep pulling on that thread and it takes us on a wild ride. This video started out just diving deeper on an odd detail that came from the Pygmy video. They had a fire-stealing myth that was startlingly similar to the Prometheus story. Eventually, this led to finding parallels all over the world. Everyone seems to have enshrined the bird as the original fire keeper, and it very well may have been caused by seeing hawks carrying fire tens of thousands of years ago, maybe more than 60,000 years ago. And it's something we can still see today. I mean, how cool is that? So buckle up. Like always, all the links are down in the description. And let's dive into what ends up being one of the greatest sorting mechanisms of all time, as these myths do evoke your implicit understanding of our place in the universe. Are those that steal fire from our supposed superiors to be praised for their uplifting of mankind? Or was that all a grave mistake? Was the sky god right in punishing humanity? Do the tricksters deserve our most hateful curses? Let me know what you think in the comments, but let's get into it. Around the world, dozens of myths recount how humanity first obtained fire, almost always through theft. In these stories, a supernatural being originally guards fire until a culture hero or trickster steals it for the people's benefit. These stolen fire myths appear on every inhabited continent, from ancient Greece to remote rainforests, deserts, and islands, despite little or no contact between these cultures. Their only link would be that direct link from the out-of-Africa migrations. Anthropologists note that this recurring motif symbolizes the acquisition of transformative knowledge or technology, but it also moralizes it and sees this advancement as often coming with a steep price. Usually, the thief of fire faces divine punishment, and humanity as a whole must suffer endless consequences. Maybe it reflects some cosmic truth, or it's just the last grasp of that spirit that seeks to restrict or hold back the progress of mankind, claiming to have power over forces like death in order to scare us out of progressing any further. Again, what started this off is that there was a nearly identical narrative in the Mbuti pygmy tale from Central Africa, which you would think would have a direct link to the Prometheus story. But when you see it all over the world, from the Kalahari deserts to the Australian bushlands, Polynesian islands, and the Americas, it more points to this sort of monomyth starting long before these different people groups even existed, before they split off into groups that would coalesce into what we call the Pygmy, the Greeks, the Aboriginals, or Creek. So let's start with the most famous. In Greek mythology, Prometheus is a titan who defied the gods out of a sympathy for humankind. At the Feast of Mycenae, Prometheus prepared 2 sacrificial portions for Zeus to choose from. One pile contained the best cuts of meat hidden beneath unappetizing entrails and stomach lining, while the other was mostly bones, but concealed under rich, glistening layers of fat. Zeus chose the latter, deceived by the attractive outer appearance, and found himself quickly left with only bones. This trick established the ritual custom that humans would keep the best meat for themselves and offer the gods bones wrapped in fat. And Prometheus is also showing humans here that the Sky King is not omnipotent. In general, he may be stronger than the other gods, but he can be deceived, and his rules can be used against him. Zeus is still regulated by the law here, by this oath that he made. He doesn't just take the other sacrificial offering. He's been tricked and locked into this new paradigm. But because of this, Zeus withdrew fire from mankind as punishment, leaving mortals to live in cold and hardship. But Prometheus was unwilling to let humanity suffer. In Hesiod's account, he carried a glowing ember hidden inside a hollow fennel stalk and brought it down to earth. With fire restored, humans gained the ability to cook, forge, and build civilization. It's not just about heat or grilling food. Fires are used in everything from agriculture to metallurgy. But when Zeus did find out, the Thunderbringer's vengeance was terrible. He ordered Prometheus chained to a remote mountain in the Caucasus, where a great eagle his emblem, would gnaw on Prometheus's liver every day, only for it to regrow each night in a cycle of eternal torment. There's also the angle here that Prometheus's name literally means to think ahead, forward thinking, insight into possible futures, and the liver was used in these strange ancient rituals as an organ that could somehow tell seers how to see the future. And there was a prophecy about one who would overthrow Zeus, so that might be the reason for this oddly specific punishment. Zeus is desperately trying to get that insight out of Prometheus. But he didn't stop there. He also punished humanity for benefiting from the stolen flame. He commanded Hephaestus to craft the first woman, Pandora, who came bearing a jar filled with countless sorrows, plague, toil, grief, and they all spilled into the human world, leaving only hope behind. We will see this general layout in every single story we look at. There's some cosmic superior, symbolized by or who takes the form of an eagle, a bird of prey, and he's very concerned with humans and fire, often punishing those involved. So now let's look at the Mbuti Pygmies.
According to legend, it comes from the first man. It has never gone out and is transmitted from generation to generation.
In their mythology, Tore is a supreme spirit of the forest, a thunder and rainbow god, and the master of animals. Infamously, Zeus also took countless animal forms, to, of all things, get with human women. But originally, fire belonged only to Tore. In the beginning of time, the first Pygmies stole fire from Tore, taking the secret of fire making for themselves. After he realized this theft, Tore became enraged. He transformed into a storm, chasing the fire thieves in a great fury. Yet the humans escaped his wrath, and when Tore finally returned to his celestial home, he would then suffer an even greater loss. He found his own mother had died during his absence. Some tellings imply that Tore's mother died from exposure to cold, or that somehow it was the fire itself that was keeping her alive. Either way, she essentially froze to death. And overwhelmed with grief and anger, the forest god enacted a severe punishment. Tore decreed that humans too would die. We could have been immortal, but living like animals. But since those pygmies dared to take that cosmic technology, they would die just as his mother had died. It was this theft that introduced death among mankind. Tore, who until then had been a provider deity, now became the god of death, forever associated with mortality. And then we can look to the San people of southern Africa, who are seen as the oldest distinct people group, and who may be our closest tied to the original source myth if there was one. But with these traditionally hunter-gatherers in the Kalahari, we find the same classic fire theft myth. The San say that long ago, Ostrich was the keeper of the first fire, hiding warm embers beneath its wings. Of course, the ostrich doesn't fly, but I find it interesting that at the core they are just looking for the greatest, the biggest, the most powerful bird. To one culture that's the eagle, to another it's the ostrich. Kagan, a beloved trickster deity often taking the form of a praying mantis, saw that ostrich possessed fire and devised a plan to obtain it for humans. In the most famous version, Kagan, in his mantis form, tricked ostrich into raising its wings, and stole the burning fire stick hidden there. In another telling, a character named Kagan simply snatches the fire from ostrich when the bird isn't looking. Either way, fire was brought to the San people from this god who just wants to help humans, this time in the form of a mantis. In one tale, ostrich could fly once, but in the process of stealing its fire, the ostrich's wings were singed, and this explains why today ostriches cannot fly, and why their plumage is blackened. Some variants go into further detail on how mantis taught humanity how to keep the stolen fire alive. It's really interesting to think that before agriculture, before herded animals, before complicated homes and other advanced tech, fire was the first thing that had to be maintained. You needed a cultural element that stressed how important this was and how fragile it was. I think this could help explain why it is ubiquitous across the world. Other hominins, not just Homo sapiens, are known to have used fire. It was one of the earliest technological boons. And we see this complex system emerge to make sure humans never forget how to do this. Since the San people are right there in that general area, this could be at the core of the ideas that were spread across East Africa before the out-of-Africa migrations. And this image, dubbed Mantis Man, could fit in with the style of other African rock art, but this was found in Iran. Don't worry, this character will get its own video someday, I actually want to include everything, even very similar modern-day alien sightings. People claim to be abducted, and inside of the alien ships, they see what they describe as just giant mantises operating the controls. They are usually exceptionally terrified of these creatures, as opposed to, say, the Greys, which they seem to work alongside of. But I think just in general, humanity doesn't really feel an affinity with bugs. So it's funny that of all things, there is this ancient praising of this mantis creature in myths that are still being kept alive by the San people today, and which we can see evidence of at least in Iran. Among the Aboriginal Australian peoples, especially in southeastern Australia, an ancient Dreamtime story describes how fire was stolen from a group of women by a clever trickster bird. In the Kulin Nation, fire was guarded by the Karatgurk, 7 ancestral sisters who alone possessed fire sticks. These women carried glowing embers on the tips of their digging sticks to cook yams. They refused to share the fire with anyone else. Crow, or Wang, an ancestral trickster figure, grew determined to obtain this fire, and he devised a cunning plan. He caught several poisonous snakes and buried them in an ant mound. He lured the Karatgurk sisters over by claiming to have found a trove of delicious ant larvae, and when the women used their digging sticks to probe the mound, the enraged snakes struck. In panic, the sisters flailed their sticks, knocking loose the live coals tied to them. This was Crow's chance. He snatched up the fallen embers and hid them in a kangaroo skin bag, fleeing just as the women realized this deception. Crow's theft set off a dramatic chase. The 7 Karatgurk sisters pursued him, but Crow, being a bird, just flew out of reach and settled on a high tree. Other ancestral beings, Bunjil the eaglehawk and his allies, they all saw the commotion. They demanded Crow share the fire with the people now gathered below, who were cold and fireless. We've been hearing that cold point a lot. Keep that in mind for later in the video. Initially, Crow refused, selfishly offering only to cook a possum for Bunjil, rather than give up the coals. But all the crowd screaming frightened Crow, and at last he hurled some of the embers down. Other birds and hawks caught and spread these coals, helping to distribute fire across the land. But the aftermath was almost a disaster. These scattered embers ignited a massive bushfire that raged across the terrain. And as a result, Crow's feathers were scorched coal black. And that's why crows are black today. The entire world might have burned, but the great eagle Bunjil intervened, containing this blaze. As for the 7 fire-guarding sisters, they were swept into the sky by the conflagration and transformed into the stars of the Pleiades constellation, eternally glowing like fiery embers in the night. Now on the surface, there do seem to be some very significant changes from the core myth here. This time it is a group of women, and the birds are doing the delivery. And though there was a jealous fire-guarding bird, it is other birds, and specifically an eagle, being the one that want to help the people. Of course, the Greek example has Zeus seeming to be against humanity, and this story doesn't have a snake, but the eagle versus serpent from ancient Greece through Christianity, on the Mexican flag, it's all over the world really. But at the core you see this as a powerful heavenly force against a lower trickster force, be it the serpent in the Garden of Eden or the thief Prometheus. Both eventually damn us to everything that sucks about human existence. But some would argue that Zeus is only seemingly to be against humanity. Remember, people really lived and breathed these ancient religions, just like Christianity or Islam today. There were debates amongst them. There was apologetics going on, some pro-Zeus, some pro-Prometheus, and if you were on the pro-Zeus side, you could see the shortening of human lives or not wanting them to have fire in the first place as protective. You don't want your toddler playing with matches, and the Heavenly Father was just looking out for us. Being anti-technology because he was wise enough to know that we would end up killing off all humanity, and really all other creations on Earth. There's a ton of that regressive anti-human impulse alive today, and tons of comments I see online. So maybe the Aboriginal version has a mentality similar to those pro-Zeus types, pro-Eaglehawk Bunjil, who actually did want to help the cold, suffering humans and stops the spread. Like how Zeus kind of reels humanity in. I wanted to share that because that is a take that popped up in my head, but honestly though, I think while the shared eagle symbol is interesting, I think the simpler telling is just that the Aboriginal version is more pro-technology. All the cultures are saying that the coolest bird is the one in charge. But here, that heavenly father, or heavenly ally at least, does not want to punish us. He's actually that same force that gave us fire in the first place and helped put out the fires. It's what most modern humanist types think about technology today. That we obviously need it, there's no going back, it's better than the chaos of nature, and any issues that it creates will be solved by better technology. It's made by humans and for humans. We will regulate it just like Eaglehawk and his allies. Again, to this just simpler pro-human point, their sort of Prometheus figure here isn't the crow, isn't the one that actually stole it, it would be the eagle. And a bit of humanity itself. There was such a clamor at the crow that caused him to drop those embers in the first place. But the eagle was our ally here. And humans never end up being punished. It's just Crow and the Seven Sisters. The only ones being punished are the ones that wanted to keep fire all to themselves. In the islands of Polynesia, the culture hero Maui shows off his cleverness in many stories, one of which is his stealing fire for humankind. A well-known Maori legend from New Zealand tells how Maui obtained fire from his great-grandmother Mahuika, the goddess of fire. In this myth, fire originally resided in Mahuika's body, in her fingernails and toenails, and nowhere else in the world. Maui was curious and wanted to help people, decided to figure out the secret of fire. But he took a curious angle. He went around and extinguished every flame in the land, so that everyone became cold and huddled in the dark. So that might seem like a contradiction there, that fire was only in her body, nowhere in the world, but also people were clearly relying on it to stay warm, and without it they're now cold and huddled in the dark. I just take that to mean that somehow Maui destroyed the existing fire-keeping culture. Maybe they didn't even understand how it worked, and just perpetuated it from naturally occurring fires, but didn't actually know how to start it. Mahuika held the key to starting fires. But either way, with no fire left on Earth, Maui then visited Mahuika's volcanic dwelling, pretending to be ignorant over what happened and just in need of a flame. The fire goddess kindly pulled off one of her fingernails, which blazed as an ember, and gave it to Maui. But Maui intentionally let the flame go out, and returned to Mahuika again and again with feigned ignorance, each time asking for another coal. One by one, Mahuika plucked out her fiery fingernails to hand to Maui, and one by one, Maui snuffed them out, tricking her into almost expending her power. At last, Mahuika realized Maui's deception, and enraged, she threw down her final toenail, releasing a massive conflagration of fire toward Maui. The ground itself was engulfed in flame, and Maui barely survived by transforming into a hawk and fleeing, his feathers singed, explaining why the hawk's feathers are brown today, just like with crow and ostrich. The god of rain, Tafiri Mateha, took pity and sent rain to quench the great fire, saving the world from burning. In the aftermath, the only safe place for the spirit of fire was certain trees, and so Mahuika deposited her last spark into the wood of the mahoe tree, which is often used as the fire stick. And so because she imbued it with this fire power, humans can create fire by rubbing wood together. This one has some very strange roles. The fire itself is a god. The rain god doesn't play that big of a role, but just to swoop in and save humans. Maui, though close to the Prometheus figure, also took away the fire that we did have. Even if it was just a culture of maintaining embers from natural fires, he makes us suffer through this transitional phase, but does eventually come back to teach us how to make fire on our own, even if he almost burned up himself in the process and burned down the entire world. It's actually the divine storm god that saves the day. No hint of punishment by any gods involved. In fact, it is the goddess of fire, Maui's own great-grandmother, that can be seen as sort of sacrificially putting herself into the wood. She sort of dies or goes into hibernation, now only to be brought to life via people who know how to make fire. And so while so many other details might seem to not be in line with the sort of monomyth, at the end of the day, humans do have to labor to kindle fire from wood, rather than whatever situation we had before where it seems that we had it freely. It's sort of like that Garden of Eden theme, where we just went around picking fruit and eating whatever we wanted. There was no labor involved in farming, but we were at the whim of nature or God. And now we come to the Americas. Among many Native American tribes, fire is said to be obtained by animals or tricksters who stole it from jealously guarding beings. One widespread motif in the Pacific Northwest involves coyote, the archetypal trickster in many Western and Plateau tribes, engineering a grand heist of fire from powerful keepers. There is a Salishan tale from the Klamath River, around northwest California into Oregon, and it tells how fire was kept by 3 skookums, often understood as spirits or powerful old beings, and they dwelled on a remote mountaintop. If you know your Mesopotamian myths, this idea of a council of gods or Elohim, even in the Bible, it just means something like powerful spirit. In a worldview where everyone may have a spirit, just some are far more powerful than others, and they almost always dwell on the tops of mountains, which would inspire the building of these artificial mountains in the forms of enormous mounds, then ziggurats and pyramids. But Coyote saw that without fire, the people were cold and unhappy, so he devised a plan. After spying on the skookum's routine, Coyote waited for the right moment. It was to be dawn, when the night's chill made the fire tender briefly leave the fire to call her sister. He then went and snatched a burning stick from their fire. Again, we could think of the obsession with dawn in other traditions across the Mediterranean. Even in the Bible, it was not saying that the light bringer is bad. It was making fun of a king who was acting like he was as great as the light bringer, when really he was pathetic, and literally the Latin word for it is just Lucifer, the light bringer, associated with the dawn or the morning star. But as he fled down the mountain, one skookum grabbed at him, burning Coyote's tail tip white. Coyote passed the ember off to a relay of animal allies. Wolf carried it next, then squirrel, then frog, as each one was pursued and singed by the enraged skookums. Wolf ran hard, but the skookums singed his fur. Squirrel's back was scorched, leaving a black mark on his neck, and his tail curled from the heat. Frog was grabbed by the tail, which popped off in the skookum's hand, and this is why frogs have no tail. Finally, as the skookum closed in, Frog spit the ember onto wood, where wood swallowed the fire and hid it. The frustrated skookums could not get it back, and the animals had succeeded. Fire now resided in wood and could be stored and pulled out by humans. According to this story, Coyote then showed the people how to draw out fire from the wood by rubbing sticks together, a skill passed down even to this day. Here it's a whole coalition of tricksters, but again a greater force is trying to prevent humans from having it, and even when we do have it, we can only bring it about by work. In the indigenous traditions of the American Southeast, a famous fire myth centers on a different figure, Grandmother Spider. The Cherokee, Choctaw, and other southeastern tribes tell how in the beginning, fire was owned by a group of selfish beings, sometimes thunder boys or lightning, sometimes an old spirit on an island, and the world remained dark and cold. The animals knew they needed fire. Possum tried first. He snuck into the fireland, grabbed up a hot coal in his fluffy tail, but the flame burned all the fur off his tail before he could escape. Next, Buzzard attempted. He swooped in to seize the brand by his beak, but the fire scorched all the feathers off his head. Other animals failed in turn, each acquiring some burn or mark. But finally, Grandmother Spider volunteered. In Cherokee versions, she is a tiny water spider. In Choctaw and others, she is an old spider woman. The spider wove a small clay pot or bowl, tied it to her back, and crept unseen into the firekeeper's lodge. Being so small, she was not noticed. The spider snatched a glowing coal and sealed it in her clay pot, then carried it back in her web to the waiting animals. She delivered fire safely to the animals, or us humans, and then taught the people how to keep it alive and use it, as well as how to make pottery to hold it. In Cherokee lore, it is often the water spider that crosses a great body of water, and honoring it as the bringer of fire. I couldn't really think of any takes on this other than maybe it was inspired by the sun rising out of the ocean. Cherokee territory was inland, but it is close enough to the East Coast to think that the tale could be from a time they lived near the beaches. But really, that's just me speculating on why the fire lands are far off past the water, and the creature that easily walks across water is the bringer in this version. Then there are different specific details, and you'll see the similarities to everything we've covered so far. The Choctaws say that in ancient times, crows were white and could sing, but they attempted to steal fire and took too long to decide how to carry it, so the smoke turned his feathers black and made his voice hoarse. The Algonquin tell of rabbit stealing fire from an old man and his daughters, interestingly similar to the Seven Sisters in Australia. The Muskegee, or Creek, say that rabbit stole fire from the weasels, and the Apache that fox stole fire from the fireflies. It's kind of funny that's not a more common version. But no matter what, whether it's animals or people or other gods, there's always this cunning theft, and that it is done selflessly. These characters just want to help humankind. In traveling to South America, we find that the motif of fire theft emerges even in the Gran Chaco region, among the Enchet people of Paraguay, also known as the Lengua. The Enchet story again features a bird as the fire keeper. In primordial times, humans had no fire and ate food raw, until one observant man noticed a strange bird cooking snails by a fire in a swamp. He watched the bird repeatedly carry snails to a spot where sticks were arranged and a thin wisp of smoke rose up. Investigating after the bird flew off, he found red-hot sticks and delicious roasted snails by the fire. But realizing the bird had a secret, he realized he needed to steal this and try it for himself. In Fraser's recounting of the tale, the man eventually manages to take some of the burning sticks or embers from the bird's fireplace for himself, and bringing it back to his village, they quickly learned how to cook food and keep warm. But of course, it does not end happily there. The offended bird sought revenge. Unable to recover the stolen embers, the bird transformed the world's weather. It created a terrible thunderstorm that struck the man's village. A lightning bolt, or series of them, from this bird-conjured storm ended up damaging and setting fire to the village, punishing the people for the theft. So like I said in the opening, here way off in Paraguay, you can see how these seemingly distinct things all came together. Fire, angry bird, angry sky, lightning. They see birds are using fire, and lightning can start fires. The gods are always known to take on new forms. When that bird angrily flew overhead, only to be followed by this lightning storm, he must have caused that. The great bird is the thunderbringer, the one jealously trying to keep fire to himself and willing to turn it on humans, burning their village down with lightning strikes, or sweeping it away in a flash flood. How funny would it be if this literally happened? Someone saw a bird with the fire stick, used it to easily create fire. It was wow, such power. But anybody interested in bird intelligence knows just how smart they can be, and therefore just how vindictive they can be. They know who took it. They can recognize individuals. What if a bird really did drop a fire stick onto a human village? Made of simple thatch roof and sticks, it'd be the perfect kindling. And this gets mythologized into the idea that the sky bird spirit was the original firekeeper, and that we can steal it, and of course it's awesome, it's a tech boon, that in one way makes our lives easier. We don't have to wait for a bird to use a fire stick, or for lightning to start bushfires, which surely our ancestors would have been among those picking out the delicious cooked meat. As the paper that I mentioned in the opening says that at times there are hundreds of these birds all waiting for the fires to die down so that they can swoop in and enjoy their cooked buffet. Obviously, humans would have noticed this too. But now we can have delicious cooked meat on demand, but there appears to be a price to pay. Even, of course, if a bird didn't do it on purpose, if a firehawk was just going about its normal burning routine, and that wildfire did consume a human settlement, the survivors would remember, hey, Bob just stole fire from some bird last week. The birds are a great spirit connected to the sky, and every time lightning kills someone or burns something down, in a way that's Bob's fault. In the supernatural mindset where everything's connected, that has to be punishment for this transgression. Obviously, I can't prove that that's true, but to me it seems pretty consistent, and since the monomyth is so widespread, I think it's plausible that it did come from some sort of real event. Despite arising in cultures oceans and millennia apart, the stories are remarkably consistent in portraying fire as a sacred, transformative force that humanity could only acquire by risky subversion, stealing from some divine superior. As Sir James Fraser and other scholars note, the theft of fire symbolizes humanity's leap from nature into culture. The moment we harnessed a dangerous power that set us apart from all other animals, but like the framework of one of the most famous stories in history, in the Garden of Eden, there was this play in the human psyche between just wanting to go with the natural rhythm of things, or to take control of our environment, despite all the new types of suffering that might bring. If the gods were the only ones that could wield fire, and we can do it too, then in a way we have become like gods. Something that would have been a startling revelation to people who lived in a spirit-dominated world. But you combine real fire thefts with the Ice Age events that made life far harder, nature didn't seem to be providing for us like it used to, and you would want to be controlling fire now more than ever. The huddled, cold, suffering humanity theme was also one of the most important elements to these myths. Everyone focuses on the action of the theft, but it's against this background which often points out specifically how cold we were. And we see humans deciding to take an active role in transforming reality around them. to be less at the whims of meteor impacts, volcanic eruptions, or dramatic climate change like we saw at the peak of the Ice Age. We have fire thanks to a heroic, cunning ancestor who paid dearly for it. And ever since, we live with the consequences. Humans would forever see themselves as distinct from nature in a unique way. As we took that tech, that torch from the Lord of Heaven, that great bird, and put it to use in ways no other creature ever dared to. Thanks for watching. Please hit that like button. It really does help a lot. And I'll see you in the next one.